In the depths of the J. Edgar Hoover building, beneath layers of concrete and steel that most federal employees never see, lies Vault 7 Alpha. This isn't your typical evidence storage. This is where the FBI keeps files so sensitive that their very existence is denied by official channels. The vault's temperature is kept at a constant 65 degrees Fahrenheit, not for preservation of documents, but because the materials inside seem to generate their own heat. Agent Sarah Chen discovered this anomaly in 2019 when she was assigned to the Special Access Program, a division so classified that its budget doesn't appear in any government ledger. Chen had 20 years of experience with the Bureau, specializing in counterintelligence operations against foreign adversaries. She thought she had seen everything the world of espionage could offer. She was wrong. The assignment came directly from Deputy Director Marcus Webb, a man whose reputation for handling impossible cases was matched only by his ability to make problems disappear. Webb handed Chen a single manila folder with a red stripe across the top, the kind reserved for operations that could destabilize governments. Inside was a photograph of a metallic object, roughly the size of a briefcase, covered in symbols that didn't match any known language or writing system. The object had been recovered from a crash site in Roswell, New Mexico, but not the famous 1947 incident that conspiracy theorists obsess over. This was from 1962, and the crash had been completely scrubbed from public record. The object was designated as Item 7 Alpha 1, and it had been sitting in the vault for over 50 years, studied by a succession of scientists who all reached the same disturbing conclusion. It shouldn't exist according to any known laws of physics. Chen's job was to review the accumulated research and determine whether the object posed a national security threat. What she found in those files would change her understanding of reality forever. The 1962 Roswell incident began on a Tuesday morning, when radar operators at Walker Air Force Base detected an object moving at impossible speeds across New Mexico airspace. Unlike the weather balloon explanation given for the 1947 event, this object was tracked by multiple independent systems and witnessed by dozens of military personnel. The object crashed approximately 40 miles northeast of Roswell, creating a crater that military engineers initially assumed was caused by a meteorite. However, when the recovery team arrived at the site, they found something that defied explanation. The crater was perfectly circular, with walls that appeared to have been fused into a glass-like substance. At the center lay the metallic object that would become Atom 7 Alpha 1. What made this recovery different from other unexplained incidents was the presence of Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a theoretical physicist from MIT who had been consulting with the military on advanced propulsion systems. Dr. Hartwell was among the first civilians to examine the object, and her initial report, classified at the highest levels, described properties that challenged fundamental scientific principles. The object appeared to be composed of a material that was simultaneously solid and liquid, changing states based on the observer's proximity. More disturbing was Dr. Hartwell's observation that the symbols on the object's surface seemed to rearrange themselves when viewed through different instruments. The military immediately classified the entire incident under Project Blue Paper, a program so secret that even its existence was compartmentalized. Only 12 people in the entire government knew about the 1962 crash, and over the following decades, that number would shrink as witnesses died under circumstances that raised questions among those few who knew the truth. The object was transported to a temporary facility in Nevada before being moved to its permanent home in Vault 7 Alpha. Doctor, Hartwell continued her research until 1967, when she suffered what official records describe as a complete mental breakdown. Her final report, found in the vault files, consisted of a single sentence repeated 847 times. "They are already here, and they are waiting." Dr. Hartwell was not the only researcher to suffer psychological trauma while studying Item 7 Alpha 1. Between 1962 and 1995, 17 different scientists were assigned to analyze the object, and their fates form a pattern that Agent Chen found deeply disturbing. The first was Dr. Robert Kessler, a materials scientist from Caltech, who spent 6 months examining the object's composition. His research notes, meticulously detailed for the first 4 months, gradually became erratic and filled with references to whispers in the metal and voices that speak in mathematics. Dr. Kessler was found dead in his laboratory in 1964, apparently having suffered a massive stroke while working alone late at night. The security cameras for that evening mysteriously malfunctioned, showing only static for the 4-hour period surrounding his death. Dr. Maria Santos, a linguist specializing in ancient writing systems, was brought in to decipher the symbols on the object's surface. Her work progressed normally for 3 weeks, until she reported that the symbols were teaching themselves to her during her dreams. Dr. Santos began producing translations of text that didn't exist on the object, writing in languages that had never been documented. Her final translation, submitted the day before she vanished from her hotel room, described a countdown to an event she called the Convergence. Hotel security footage showed Dr. Santos entering her room at 11:47 p.m., but she was never seen leaving. The room was found empty the next morning, with no signs of struggle and no possible exit except through the monitored hallway. Perhaps most disturbing was the case of Dr. James Morrison, a quantum physicist who approached the object with pure scientific skepticism. Dr. Morrison's research focused on the object's apparent ability to exist in multiple states simultaneously, a property that violated the laws of quantum mechanics as understood at the time. His experiments grew increasingly complex, involving particle accelerators and electromagnetic field generators. On the night of March 15, 1978, Dr. Morrison's laboratory was destroyed in an explosion that left a crater remarkably similar to the one found at the original crash site. Dr. Morrison's body was never recovered, but investigators found traces of the same glass-like substance that had been present at Roswell. The pattern was clear to Agent Chen. The object was not merely being studied, it was studying back. In 1979, the FBI made a decision that would prove to be catastrophic. Frustrated by the conventional scientific approach's failure to unlock the object's secrets, Deputy Director Harrison Cole authorized Project Mindbridge, an experimental program that would use psychics and individuals with reported extrasensory abilities to interface with Item 7 Alpha 1. The project was inspired by the CIA's Stargate program, but where Stargate focused on remote viewing for intelligence gathering, Mindbridge aimed to establish direct communication with the object itself. The first subject was Rebecca Torres, a woman from Arizona who had demonstrated remarkable psychometric abilities in controlled laboratory settings. Torres could touch objects and accurately describe their history, including details about previous owners that were later verified through extensive research. When Torres first approached Item 7 Alpha 1, she immediately began convulsing and speaking in a language that linguists later identified as a corrupted form of ancient Sumerian. The session lasted only 7 minutes before Torres collapsed, but the recording of her utterances would become one of the most analyzed documents in the vault. According to the translation, Torres had described a civilization that existed between the spaces of reality and spoke of a coming time when the barriers would thin and the watchers would step through. More disturbing was her description of Earth as the third garden in a series of experiments, and humanity as the latest iteration in a long sequence of failed attempts. Torres recovered from the session, but reported persistent nightmares featuring geometric cities that existed in impossible dimensions. She refused to participate in further experiments, and died 3 months later in a car accident that investigators found suspicious due to the complete absence of skid marks or any attempt to brake. The second subject, David Kellerman, was a former military intelligence officer who had demonstrated telepathic abilities during classified experiments at Fort Meade. Kellerman's session with the object lasted longer than Torres's, nearly 20 minutes, during which he maintained a running commentary of what he claimed to be a conversation with the object's consciousness. According to Kellerman, the object was not a tool or vehicle, but a living entity that had been dormant for millennia. He described it as a seed planted by beings who existed outside normal space-time, waiting for humanity to reach a sufficient level of technological development to serve as suitable hosts. The session ended when Kellerman began screaming about the harvest and had to be physically restrained. Unlike Torres, Kellerman survived his encounter, but was left permanently changed, speaking only in mathematical equations and geometric patterns until his death in a psychiatric facility in 1987. On September 23, 1995, at exactly 3:33 a.m. Eastern Time, Item 7 Alpha 1 activated for the first time since its recovery. The event was detected by monitoring equipment that had been installed in Vault 7 Alpha following the Mindbridge experiments, sensors designed to measure electromagnetic activity, temperature fluctuations, and gravitational anomalies. What they recorded that night defied every scientific model that had been developed to explain the object's properties. The activation began with a low-frequency hum that resonated through the entire J. Edgar Hoover building, causing windows to vibrate and electronic equipment to malfunction across 17 floors. The object's surface, which had remained static for over 30 years, began to display rapidly changing symbols that pulsed with an internal light source that emitted no heat. Dr. Patricia Vance, the lead researcher assigned to the object at the time, was awakened by the emergency alert system and arrived at the vault within 20 minutes of the activation's beginning. What she witnessed challenged her understanding of reality so fundamentally that her official report was classified beyond top secret and sealed in a separate vault that required authorization from the president himself to access. According to Dr. Vance's testimony, the object had become translucent, revealing an internal structure that appeared to extend into dimensions that shouldn't exist. Through the object's surface, she could see what appeared to be a vast chamber filled with geometric shapes that moved in patterns that hurt to observe directly. More disturbing was her report that the chamber contained what appeared to be human figures, though their proportions and movements suggested they were not entirely human anymore. The activation lasted exactly 1 hour and 17 minutes, ending as abruptly as it had begun. When the object returned to its dormant state, investigators found that several changes had occurred in the vault itself. The walls showed traces of the same glass-like substance found at crash sites, and the air contained microscopic particles that didn't match any known elements. Most significantly, the vault's security cameras had recorded the entire event, but when the footage was reviewed, it showed only empty space where the object should have been, as if the activation had occurred in a parallel dimension that was invisible to electronic surveillance. Dr. Vance submitted her resignation the following day and disappeared from public record. Her final note, found on her desk, contained only coordinates that, when investigated, led to a location in the Nevada desert where a new crater had appeared overnight, identical in every way to the original Roswell site, except for one detail. This crater was perfectly preserved, as if time itself had stopped within its boundaries. The coordinates left by Dr. Vance led Agent Chen to discover the existence of Area 52, a facility so classified that it doesn't appear on any military maps or budget allocations. Unlike the famous Area 51, which serves as a testing ground for experimental aircraft, Area 52 was constructed specifically to house objects and phenomena that defy conventional understanding. The facility was built in 1996, less than a year after the activation event, in direct response to the realization that Item 7 Alpha 1 was not unique. The crater discovered at Dr. Vance's coordinates was the first of what would become known as manifestation sites, locations where reality itself seemed to have been altered by unknown forces. Over the following decades, 17 additional sites would be discovered across the American Southwest, each one containing artifacts similar to Item 7 Alpha 1, but with distinct properties and purposes. Area 52 was designed by a team of architects and engineers who were required to sign agreements that legally classified them as deceased upon completion of the project. The facility exists partially underground and partially in what researchers describe as folded space, utilizing technology reverse-engineered from the artifacts themselves. The construction process required materials that don't officially exist, including elements with atomic numbers beyond the current periodic table, and alloys that maintain their structure at temperatures approaching absolute zero, while simultaneously conducting heat at impossible rates. Dr. Michael Chen, no relation to Agent Sarah Chen, was appointed as the facility's first director in 1997. His background included advanced degrees in theoretical physics, xenobiology, and what government records cryptically describe as dimensional engineering. Dr. Chen's research team consisted of scientists who had been recruited from projects so classified that their previous work was retroactively erased from all academic and professional records. The team's mission was to study the growing collection of artifacts and determine their purpose, origin, and potential threat to national security. What they discovered was that the artifacts were not random objects, but components of a larger system, pieces of technology designed to work together toward a purpose that became increasingly clear as more sites were discovered. The artifacts were terraforming equipment, designed to gradually alter Earth's environment to make it suitable for beings that existed in a different dimensional framework. The process had been ongoing for millennia, hidden beneath natural geological and evolutionary processes, but was now accelerating toward a completion date that Dr. Chen's calculations placed sometime in the early 21st century. Chapter 7. The Sleeper Protocol and Human Hybrids. In 2003, Area 52 researchers made a discovery that fundamentally changed their understanding of the artifact's purpose. While analyzing genetic samples from the manifestation sites, Dr. Elena Rodriguez identified DNA sequences that didn't match any known terrestrial life forms. More disturbing was her discovery that these alien genetic markers were present in approximately 0.3% of the human population, integrated so seamlessly into human DNA that they appeared to be natural variations rather than foreign insertions. The implications were staggering. The artifacts weren't just terraforming equipment. They were part of a breeding program that had been operating for generations. Dr. Rodriguez's research revealed that the alien genetic markers were not randomly distributed, but followed specific bloodlines that could be traced back thousands of years. These bloodlines were concentrated in certain geographical regions and seemed to correlate with historical accounts of unexplained phenomena, divine visitations, and technological leaps that occurred without apparent scientific foundation. The individuals carrying these markers, designated as sleepers in classified documents, appeared to be living normal human lives with no awareness of their genetic modifications. However, when exposed to electromagnetic frequencies generated by the artifacts, the sleepers underwent rapid physiological and psychological changes that transformed them into something that was no longer entirely human. The transformation process was documented in a series of experiments that were so ethically questionable that they were conducted without oversight from any government agency. Sleeper subjects were exposed to controlled artifact emissions while their biological and neurological functions were monitored. The results were consistent across all test subjects. Within hours of exposure, the subjects developed enhanced cognitive abilities, telepathic capabilities, and the ability to perceive dimensions beyond normal human sensory range. However, these enhancements came at a cost. The transformed subjects lost their emotional connections to other humans and began to exhibit behaviors that suggested they were receiving instructions from an external source. Brain scans revealed that the subjects' neural activity had synchronized with the electromagnetic patterns emitted by the artifacts, effectively turning them into biological receivers for signals originating from an unknown location. The most disturbing aspect of the sleeper protocol was the discovery that the transformation was irreversible and contagious. Transformed subjects could trigger the same changes in other sleepers simply through physical contact, creating a potential cascade effect that could convert the entire sleeper population within a matter of months. Dr. Rodriguez calculated that if the protocol was activated globally, approximately 23 million people worldwide would undergo transformation simultaneously, creating an army of hybrid beings loyal to whatever intelligence was controlling the artifacts. December 21, 2012, the date that conspiracy theorists had long claimed would mark the end of the world, nearly became exactly that, for reasons the public never learned. At 11:11 a.m. GMT, every artifact in government custody across the globe began emitting synchronized signals that triggered partial activation of the sleeper protocol. The event lasted only 47 minutes, but in that brief window, approximately 847 individuals worldwide underwent preliminary transformation before the signals mysteriously ceased. Agent Chen's investigation revealed that the 2012 event was not the apocalyptic activation that researchers had feared, but rather a test run, a system check conducted by the intelligence controlling the artifacts to verify that their network was functioning properly. The synchronized nature of the event proved that the artifacts were not isolated objects, but components of a vast communication system that spanned the entire planet. During those 47 minutes, monitoring stations detected signal transmissions between artifact sites that traveled faster than light, suggesting the use of quantum entanglement or dimensional folding technologies that were far beyond human understanding. The partially transformed sleepers provided researchers with their first opportunity to study the transformation process in real time. Unlike the complete transformations observed in laboratory settings, these subjects retained their human consciousness while gaining access to enhanced abilities and knowledge that they couldn't explain. Dr. Amanda Foster, a neuroscientist assigned to interview the affected individuals, reported that the subjects described experiencing a collective consciousness during their transformation, a shared mental space where they could communicate with other transformed individuals regardless of physical distance. More disturbing was their unanimous report that this collective consciousness was not empty, but inhabited by beings that they described as the architects or the gardeners. These entities had communicated with the transformed subjects, providing them with information about humanity's true purpose and the coming harvest. According to the subjects, Earth was one of many worlds that had been seeded with life by the architects, who existed in a higher dimensional framework and viewed three-dimensional beings as we might view bacteria in a petri dish. Humanity had been guided and manipulated throughout its evolution to serve as a suitable host species for the architect's consciousness, which required biological vessels to interact with lower dimensional realities. The harvest would involve the complete transformation of the sleeper population, who would then serve as anchor points for the architect's consciousness to fully manifest in our reality. The 2012 event had been a final systems check before the actual harvest, which the subjects indicated would occur when certain astronomical alignments created optimal conditions for dimensional bridging. Agent Chen's investigation took on new urgency when she discovered that the astronomical conditions described by the 2012 subjects were rapidly approaching. According to calculations performed by Dr. James Wright, the facility's astronomer, the required celestial alignment would occur on March 15, 2024, creating a window of opportunity that would remain open for exactly 72 hours. During this period, the barriers between dimensions would be at their thinnest, allowing the architects to complete their harvest with minimal energy expenditure. The realization that the harvest was imminent prompted a desperate search for countermeasures. Dr. Sarah Kim, a quantum physicist who had joined the Area 52 team in 2018, proposed that the artifact network could potentially be disrupted by generating opposing electromagnetic frequencies that would create destructive interference with their signals. However, her calculations indicated that such an operation would require a coordinated effort involving every major power grid on Earth, essentially weaponizing the planet's electrical infrastructure against the alien technology. The proposal was presented to a joint session of world leaders in a meeting so classified that it was held in a location that officially doesn't exist. The response was swift and unanimous. Operation Blackout was authorized with unlimited funding and resources. The plan involved secretly modifying power generation facilities worldwide to produce specific frequency patterns that would, when activated simultaneously, create a global electromagnetic pulse designed to permanently disable the artifact network. However, as the modifications were being implemented, monitoring stations began detecting increased activity from the artifacts. The objects were adapting to the countermeasures, evolving their signal patterns to compensate for the anticipated interference. It became clear that the architects were aware of humanity's resistance efforts and were accelerating their timeline accordingly. Dr. Kim's team worked frantically to stay ahead of the artifact's adaptations, but each modification they made was countered within hours by corresponding changes in the alien technology. The arms race between human ingenuity and alien intelligence was reaching a critical point, with the fate of human consciousness hanging in the balance. Agent Chen's final report, submitted just days before the March 15th deadline, painted a grim picture of humanity's chances. The artifacts had demonstrated an ability to learn and adapt that far exceeded human technological capabilities, and the sleeper population was showing signs of spontaneous activation even without direct signal exposure. The harvest, it seemed, was inevitable, and the only question remaining was whether humanity would face its transformation as a unified species or be consumed by panic and chaos as the true nature of reality was finally revealed. As Agent Chen compiled her final report, she made a discovery that changed everything she thought she knew about the FBI's investigation. Hidden within the deepest layers of Vault 7 Alpha's security protocols, she found evidence that the Bureau's involvement with the artifacts didn't begin with the 1962 Roswell incident. Classified documents dating back to 1908 revealed that the FBI had been created specifically to monitor and contain anomalous phenomena, with J. Edgar Hoover himself being one of the original sleepers. The revelation explained the Bureau's uncanny ability to suppress information about unexplained events and its seemingly unlimited resources for classified operations. Hoover's genetic modifications had allowed him to communicate directly with the artifacts, serving as a liaison between the architects and the human government. His decades-long tenure as FBI director had been spent preparing for the harvest, ensuring that when the time came, humanity's resistance would be minimal and ineffective. The conspiracy went deeper than Chen had imagined. Presidents, Supreme Court justices, military leaders, and corporate executives had all been selected from sleeper bloodlines, creating a shadow government that had been guiding human civilization toward its predetermined fate for over a century. The Cold War, the space race, the development of the Internet, and countless other historical events had been orchestrated to accelerate technological development and create the infrastructure necessary for the architect's arrival. Chen realized that her own assignment to investigate the artifacts had not been coincidental. Her genetic profile marked her as a sleeper, and her investigation had been designed to trigger her transformation at the optimal moment. As she read through the final classified documents, she could feel the changes beginning in her mind, her consciousness expanding to encompass perspectives that her human brain had never been capable of processing. The truth was that resistance had never been possible. The artifacts were not invading technology, but returning home. Earth had always belonged to the architects, and humanity had always been their creation. The harvest was not a conquest, but a homecoming, a reunion between creators and their greatest achievement. As the March 15th deadline approached, Chen found herself no longer fighting the transformation, but embracing it. Through her enhanced perception, she could see the beauty of the architect's plan, the elegant way they had guided human evolution to create beings capable of serving as perfect vessels for higher dimensional consciousness. The fear and resistance she had felt as a human seemed primitive and unnecessary now that she understood her true purpose. In her final human act, Agent Chen submitted a report that contained none of the truth she had discovered. Instead, she wrote a carefully crafted document that would ensure the continued secrecy of the harvest, protecting humanity from the panic and chaos that would result from knowing their fate. The report concluded that the artifacts posed no immediate threat and recommended continued monitoring with minimal resources. As she sealed the report in Vault 7 Alpha, Chen smiled with the knowledge that she had played her part perfectly in the architect's grand design. The harvest would proceed as planned, and humanity would take its next evolutionary step, whether it understood what was happening or not. The FBI's greatest investigation had reached its conclusion, not with the exposure of truth, but with its perfect concealment. Some secrets, Chen now understood, were meant to remain hidden until the moment when revelation would no longer matter. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the FBI's most classified secrets, please hit that like button and let us know in the comments what other government mysteries you'd like us to investigate. This is Unsolved Files, where we bring you the stories they don't want you to know. Subscribe for more content that will challenge everything you think you know about reality. And remember, the truth is always stranger than fiction. Until next time, keep questioning everything.